needs no introduction, but I want to make sure you all also know the wonderful director, Varda Bar-Kar. I know that there is a lot of love in this room for Janis and the film, so I'm going to make sure there's a lot of time for conversation with the audience. I'm going to get us started. Can you introduce yourself? Oh yeah, my name's Brittany. I work with an organization called the Feature Film is Female in New York. But I do just want to make sure that when it is time for questions, that we all ask questions. I know it's easy to gush in these scenarios, but let's talk about the film and talk about the art and leave it at that. Yeah, okay, cool.
Well, yeah, because I'm wonderful and I know that, so.
Exactly, yeah. No fluff. Janis, I imagine many people for many years have been eager to tell your story. How is this the one that finally stuck? Varda got through to you?
So the first time I got offered the chance to have an autobiography film made, I was 16. And I cleverly said, no, I don't think that there's enough there. And over the years, I was busy. I was not interested. And then I hit my 60s, and I realized that there was a certain amount of life that I had lived that the generations coming up couldn't really understand because they weren't there. And I had kept almost everything. So I started working with Varda College on my archives, and coincidentally, right around that time, Varda emailed, said, I want to make your life story, and it was the start of COVID. And I said, I'm not interested. And she was so annoyingly persistent that we started talking. And when we started talking, I realized that she understood what I wanted out of this film, which was not just a puff piece, but something that would show the times and the reflection of the times in the songs and how the songs then reflected the times. And from there, it just became organic. The moment that I signed the contract, I basically said, here's all of the archival material that I have. Let me know what you want from me, otherwise it's your film.
And Varda, what led you to Janis? I mean, other than the obvious osmosis through pop culture through the years, but you really wanted to tell this story.
Yes, I did. I had finished my prior music film, which is called Fandango at the Wall, and I was thinking about what do I want to do next. And I really decided there was a lot of discussion about identity, and I started thinking my own identity, and I decided I wanted to make a film closely aligned with my own identity. And I sat with that question, I meditated, and Janis Ian popped into my mind, and that's how it started.
And so it was all very, to use an overused word, it's all been very organic, down to everybody that we wanted to be part of the film said yes. Baez had already said she was not doing any more interviews for a couple of years, but then when Varda called, she said absolutely. So it moved at its own pace over, what, 3 years?
Yes, 3.5 years. Mm-hmm.
And it moved at a snail's pace also because independent films funding. But
no, that's not for a documentary. That's not a snail's pace. That is an amazing pace.
It moved incredibly quickly for a documentary.
People take 10, 20 years to make documentaries.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
You mentioned the archive. The film sort of ends with you handing over your archive. I'm so curious how that sort of guided the film and just your experience digging through all of that.
I don't know how much it had to do with the film from Varda's point of view. That would be her question. From my point of view, my wife and I had a foundation that we ran for many years in honor of my mother, who went back to school in her 40s. And she had MS, and I'm convinced that going back to school kept her alive. And so when she died, we started raising money to send returning students, which is what they call old people, back to school. By the time it closed, we had given away over $1.25 million in endowments, and Varda College was one of the schools. I never graduated high school. I don't have an affiliation with anywhere. So I was sitting around with the head of philanthropy one day talking, and she said something, and I said, well, I'll just donate my archives. And she looked at me and said, well, we can't afford them. And I said, no, I know that. That's why it's called a donation. Because I had already talked with the Smithsonian and the New York Public Library and all these places, but Varda made sense. It made sense in terms of my life. There was some conflict with the board because Varda is a quote unquote Christian school. I am a Jewish lesbian. But somehow, in places, in people's minds, they didn't go together. But to me, if you walk the walk and you talk the talk, I don't care. That's the bottom line. And I didn't mean to shut you off, it was just a clicking sound.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry, my fault.
okay, I'll keep it less.
In regards to the film, when I first, after Janis Ian came into my mind, which is probably due to the fact that when I was in high school, someone had given me her album Between the Lines, and when I listened to it, I felt so seen and heard by her music that I would cry. And I think it's sort of like it probably has for many of you here, her music became part of my DNA. And that's, once I realized I wanted to make a film about her, I really knew about that album and the Stars album and Aftertones, but I did not know that much, anything really about her life and her other body of music. And I started to do research. And so in a way I was digging into her archives even before she gave me her archives. And read her autobiography, Society's Child, which is, if you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. It's an extraordinary, well-written book and fills in a lot of gaps in the film. And I thought, oh my God, someone must have made a documentary about her. And I went online and I searched Janis Ian documentary, and I couldn't find one. And I couldn't believe it.
Janis, I'm so curious what the sort of emotional similarities were between making this film and writing your memoir.
No, because I had nothing to do with the making of the film. In the memoir, I took a full year, which is unheard of for somebody like me. I took a full year and I stayed home. I left home 4 times. One was to host a 75th birthday for Odetta. One was to play bass for Marie Knight. I can't remember the other 2, but that was it. I stayed home and I wrote. With the film, I basically showed up for 3 interviews. And then I contacted some people who contacted me and said, is it okay for me to talk to this person? And I would say yes. That was basically my involvement. I mean, the film is Varda's, as it should be. And I didn't want a documentary at the time.
I think because your voice is so present in the film, it feels like you must have been in the room together or something. That's how I imagine you. But
Well, we were. We were in the room together twice, because the first one was.
The first one was a Zoom. But I will say, I mean, I feel as a documentary filmmaker and telling Janis's story, I had to sort of step aside. It wasn't, the film is not, I think it reflects a lot of my values, for sure. I know it reflects a lot of my values. But, this is Janis's story, and my job was to, step aside and let her voice, come to the fore, and her story come to the fore.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hallmarks of an artist, is that you get out of the way of your talent. You get out of the way of your work. You let the work take its lead. It's your job to nurture it. It's your job to corral it, make sure it's not a runaway horse. But the work is what leads you. You don't lead the work.
I think one of my biggest takeaways from watching your film is that you truly lived the life of an artist, which isn't something I think a lot of people can say. I think a combination of like the work, the grit, also the lack of compromise. Like, I don't know, would you agree? Do you feel like you've like lived this artist life that you kind of, 16-year-old you had imagined?
No, 16-year-old me imagined being a Beatle. that was really actually 14-year-old me imagined that. There was actually a revelatory moment when I was 16 and I had just met Joplin and Big Brother, and we were all playing Berkeley. And I walked on stage, and I don't know why it had never occurred to me before, but I suddenly watched this entire audience of people older than me hanging on every word, and I remember thinking, oh my God, they're listening to everything I say, and it scared me, because it was suddenly so much responsibility. I don't think that I've been particularly courageous. I know an awful lot of artists who are much more courageous than I've been. But my life seems to have led through accidents of circumstance to questions like, do you want to change the name and have a hit record guaranteed? And I'm, 15, I don't care. I'm gonna make a record. And from there to my parents' history with the FBI. That's just part of, I don't know, if you believe in karma, I was put in here in part to have to live 3 lives at once and just keep saying no to people. It's not deliberate, trust me. Well, it is now, because now I don't care. I mean, you hit 70 and there's a whole sea change that happens. And it's like, take one for the team, why doesn't somebody? Okay, that's enough of that, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna open it up to the audience. Questions, please. We'll start right here.
Yes, I know this is going to be screened on PBS, on American Masters, and I was wondering how you got involved with PBS and how important they were to getting the film made.
Well, I had a film called Big Voice that was on PBS. Thank you. And the producer who had selected that film to be on PBS had asked me, she saw Fandango at the Wall, and she really, really wanted it. And I was not the producer of that film, and I didn't have a say, and the producer decided to say no. And then a few months later, she said, well, what are you working on now? And when I told her about this film, which was a very early stage, she immediately said, this would be perfect for American Masters. And I contacted them, and they very quickly came on board. And they were very important in a portion of the funding, and they did give us notes, but that's about it, really.
And tremendous credibility, because you say American Masters and people go, oh, it's real. Otherwise you say I have a film out and they go, oh nice, the video, cool.
But I just thought also how fitting, because Janis Ian belongs amongst the American Masters.
Yeah.
Okay, I see a hand. Oh, right there, yes.
Hi, I have a question for Janis. I was just wondering, what is it like to kind of like sit in an audience, like, I don't know, like any of us, and just like watch yourself be in a documentary, watch your life on
Honestly, I've only had that chance once, when the film was first shown at Berea, and I was so conscious of the audience watching me that I couldn't really concentrate. My wife and I are planning this summer to sneak in somewhere and watch it from the back. So I don't really know yet. I will say that it's very odd to see yourself on film. But, at least it's not a biopic, and that would be even weirder.
Yeah, right here.
Hi, I want to get up. I'm very comfortable.
Question, please.
I want to ask a question to the director. How has your life changed since being her? And do you feel like you have like a parallel life with them, or is it something like what was attractive to you when you met Janis?
Well, in terms of how I have changed, I have become a stronger person. I think a stronger artist and more confident in speaking my truth because of Janis's example and working with her. I also think I'm a stronger businesswoman. Janis has mentored me in that regard as well. So it's been very powerful. I've noticed also that we do share a lot of values and a world view. I mean, whenever, I feel like Janis is speaking for me in a sense. She's speaking her own voice and her own truth. But even like when I heard the songs, she's still representing me and I still feel heard by her.
If I could add something to that, women have always been in business. We have always done business. But in my profession, which is singer-songwriter ultimately, these last 30 years have seen a real sea change because there are not the managers interested in people like us. We were being written out more and more. Record companies, radio traditionally plays one female for every 10. So many of us, Ani DeFranco for instance, took over our own careers. And as a woman business person, I run a record company with 25 albums out. I run a publishing company with 600 songs in release. I run my bookings, I oversee everything, and I oversee my financials. And I try very hard with other women in particular to impress upon them that yes, it's great to be an artist, it's wonderful. All of us would love to spend all of our time doing art, but you can't. Because if you do, that art is going to be taken away from you. So it's really important to me when somebody like Varda is with me. Okay, he's trying so hard.
Okay, sure.
Okay. And you can hear me. A two-part question, right on the heels of the business side. What's the two parts? So let me say both. Different questions. What happened to the business manager that screwed you over?
He died.
But was there any legal action? Did you sue him?
There would have been, but he died.
Oh, he died that early?
Very unfortunate.
I didn't know he died that early. Okay, so you never got to sue him or
I
nothing?
didn't even get to smack him.
So you got nothing of that back?
No, I
Talk
got
about
nothing
karma.
of that.
Nothing. And the other...
I put his kids through through college. So that's how I look at it.
Well, I'm sorry he didn't get to face, you didn't
I
get
know,
to sue him.
retribution is just overrated.
Well, that was heartbreaking. And the other question is, it didn't say when you did the show here in Manhattan, because I'm a Manhattanite, so it's in Lincoln Center, I guess in '68, and you said, I'm done.
Mhm.
That's it. You didn't say why you were done.
Well, the film doesn't say why I was done, but I think I say at some point that it was just a perfect group of circumstances.
Yeah, it does.
In the same time, I had Society's Child. People were telling me they were going to kill me. My parents were getting divorced. They were right in the middle of that. Music and Art High School had shut me out for being disruptive because all the teachers were at me all the time.
Right.
And I was trying to have a full-time career, be a songwriter, write 12 brilliant songs or 11 brilliant songs, create an album, and then tour for 9 months. And I was 15.
So it's just too much.
I went through all of that in 2 years, and it was just too much.
Did you ever think you'd come back, or you probably thought you'd
I
come?
didn't think about it.
Okay.
I knew that the main thing I knew was that I didn't know whether I was ever going to be a great songwriter. And I didn't know whether I wanted to be a songwriter or a poet. And Peter, like he says in the film, brought me Rimbaud, he brought me Verlaine, he brought me Jack London, he brought me Mary Oliver, he brought me everything. And all of a sudden there was a whole world there that I'd never been exposed to at school. So I educated myself in that world, and through that discovered that songwriting was where my talent really lay. But I had to prove it to myself first, because I was not going to be a second-rate songwriter. I was going to be a vet if I had to do that.
Well, thank God for those books then, right?
Well, thank God
It
for
changed.
the people who supported me.
Changed everything. That's great.
You guys.
First off, I just want to say that your soundtrack to my life. My grandmother was a big fan of your music, and I've listened to your music my entire life. And
Thank
I'm
you.
50. And one of the questions I have to ask you is, of all the people who've covered your material, who would you say best accomplished what your intent was?
One thing I have learned since my 20s is not to make enemies. In all honesty, and this is such a cliche, I know how much work goes into an artist choosing a song, because I know when Bette Midler chose Some People's Lives, that was one of 200 songs that she listened to. So, although it's a cliche, when somebody records my song, it's an honor, because it means that song hit a universal so strong that they felt that it was theirs. And in that sense, I don't have a favorite. I have people where I think, wow, that was really fascinating. Vanilla Fudge doing Society's Child and making a rock and roll record, fascinating, wonderful. I have songs that I wish somebody would do. I want Pink to record a song called Resist, if she's listening. Yeah, if any of you know her, just let her know. But I really, honest to God, do not have a favorite. I really don't. It's just always amazing. I'm bragging now. I got a note from Patti LuPone the other day, thanking me for stars. And, you know, it's moments like that in an artist's life that make your life. Being recognized by a peer. Yeah.
I heard her perform it last week at the Symphony Center. It
She
was
does a
fabulous.
bang-up job, doesn't she? Yeah.
We can take one more question. I'll let you pick, Janis.
Two short ones. 1, 2. Go. Quick.
How did you end up going to East Orange High School? Because I grew up in East Orange.
Because I lived in East Orange. Okay, that sit down. Gentleman back there, quickly. Stand, talk.
What is your favorite song?
Of mine?
Yes.
Because my favorite song is Do Run Run. I'm so serious. My favorite song of mine, Stars, because it's my coming of age song. Yes.
Well, this is just adulation.
No, you can't do that. We need
But-
questions.
My question is, I run a culture series at the Queen's Library. I'd love for you and your director to do an online talk with us.
If you go to her website or my website,
Yeah,
the screening
and
areas,
we'll
there are
connect
people
you
to
with
talk to.
them.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll do
I have nothing to do with that.
We'll help set it up.
We're always looking for excuses to
Yeah,
get here.
we're public libraries, so
Love public libraries.
we'll do it.
Excellent.
Cool. Thank you all so very much. for
Thank
being
you.
here.
I have some postcards here for the film, if everyone wants one. I'll give you one.
Varda is learning the art of self-promotion. Please make her postcards.
Good job, sweetie. Good job. Good answer. Thank Thank you. Go ahead. Oh.
Let me just make a little, change one little setting, make it better. Here we go.
I
Where in Manhattan did you move to when you came to Jersey?
we moved to 85th and West End.
Oh, I live in 87th and Amsterdam.
Oh, yeah. My mother lived on 86th and Amsterdam.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's right in my neighborhood.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Hey, let's spread the word, everybody.